Hola, buenas tardes. Muy buenas tardes a todos. Esta sesión será en inglés y español. Y entonces para los que necesitan de traducción, porque tenemos ponentes en inglés y español, los aparatos de traducción los pueden coger. Good afternoon, everybody. This session will be in English and Spanish. So for those who need translations, we have both speakers from both languages. So for those of you who need devices, just please go ahead and get them, because we will use the two languages to work. Me gustaría solicitarles también que lleguen un poco más para acá, porque el salón es muy grande por el tema de la traducción. Entonces sería mejor si ustedes se pueden poner un poquito más para acá, para que estemos un poco más juntos. So if you could just move a little bit towards the center. This is a huge room because of the translation devices. So if we could stay just a little closer, it would be great. And I will just start speaking in Spanish and we'll move it from there. Okay, bueno. Quería empezar la sesión que tenemos es acelerando la respuesta sobre la resistencia a las drogas, tuberculosis y la agenda de resistencia antimicrobiana. Y bueno, les quería comentar diciendo que todos creo que ya saben que la tuberculosis Es la enfermedad infecciosa que más mata en el mundo y también una de las enfermedades que es la principal enfermedad que, dentro del ámbito de la resistencia antimicrobiana. Y nosotros estamos aquí para tratar de ese tema. Tenemos parlamentarios y sociedad civil, porque la idea de esa sesión es hacer hablar las personas que están involucradas en esta agenda desde la perspectiva de los parlamentos y desde la perspectiva de la sociedad civil. Y como primer ponente quería invitar aquí al podio al honorable diputado Elías Íñiguez Mejía, de México, que es el anfitrión aquí de nuestro evento y que va a hablar un poco. Gracias.
Muy buenas tardes. Antes que nada, comentarles que me siento muy contento de que México, Jalisco, sea donde nos encontramos sociedad civil, parlamentarios, asociaciones civiles, médicos, instituciones, congresistas, todos con un mismo fin. Y el fin es qué vamos a hacer y qué estamos haciendo con la problemática que tenemos de salud pública en el mundo. Ya lo decía Cintia, el cual me gusta mucho no decirlo, pero sí entenderlo, que la tuberculosis, como ustedes saben, es la enfermedad que más gente ha matado y que sin embargo sigue el tabú o sigue la mala información de algunas personas en algunos países que creen que está erradicada o que ya no existe la tuberculosis en su país. Nosotros, los parlamentarios, hemos formado el Frente Parlamentario contra la Tuberculosis. Yo soy el copresidente, uno de tres. Uruguay, Perú y México somos los copresidentes del Frente Parlamentario de América. En este frente, la principal función del frente pues es cómo le hacemos los parlamentarios para cambiar nuestras políticas públicas. ¿Cómo le hacemos los parlamentarios para adecuar las políticas públicas, nuestras leyes en cada uno de nuestros países, para poder sacar adelante el problema de la tuberculosis? La abogacía política de cada uno de nuestros países es la obligación de cada uno de los parlamentarios que formamos el Frente. El Frente cuenta en América, cuenta con gente muy valiosa como la Secretaría Técnica, pero además con muchos apoyos tanto de la sociedad civil y con asociaciones civiles. En el Frente Parlamentario nos hemos puesto a trabajar. Yo les decía a mis compañeros parlamentarios de América que México, Uruguay y Perú, siendo los más antiguos, teníamos que haber ya hecho algo más contundente. Y pudimos y hemos podido, por ejemplo, en Perú ya hay una ley contra la tuberculosis. Esa ley donde aclara y especifica que debe de haber un fondo específico para la tuberculosis. Pero no nada más es tener el fondo. En muchos de nuestros países tenemos que ver que se etiquete ese recurso, pero además de que se etiquete, ver en qué proyecto y cómo lo vamos a aplicar, darle seguimiento y vigilar el recurso. Porque si nosotros como parlamentarios no entendemos que además de ponerle dinero, tenemos que hacer vínculo con la sociedad, con las sociedades civiles, con la Unión, con el Fondo Mundial, pues no vamos a poder lograr un gran avance en la problemática que tenemos. En México, me voy a México. Bueno, la lucha en la prevención y el control de la tuberculosis se debe de apegar plenamente a la norma que ya tenemos ahorita vigente, lo que implica que tiene que estar reportado en una ley. En México sí dice y está escrito que en la Ley General de Salud, en el artículo 1, hay una protección a la salud, pero también es un derecho que tenemos, el artículo 4 en México, es un derecho que tenemos a la salud todos los mexicanos. La prevención y el control de enfermedades transmisibles también tiene recurso, pero independientemente que en México, igual que en otros países, hemos cambiado la ley, seguimos con una grave problemática. Muchos de ustedes podrán pensar que en México estamos muy bien. Ustedes ya conocieron Guadalajara, los que tienen la oportunidad de conocer otras ciudades, podrán decir en México pues es un bajo índice de tuberculosis. Y la verdad que no. En México tenemos de 20,000 a 30,000 casos nuevos reportados al año. Pero lo más complicado y lo más delicado es que tenemos de 2,500 a 3,000 muertes por año. Se nos sigue muriendo gente. Y lo más complicado para mí, como médico de profesión, pero como diputado, como político, es hablar el idioma de los demás parlamentarios. En la Cámara de Diputados somos 500 diputados, pero solamente 10 somos médicos. Y yo quiero felicitar a la sociedad civil, a mi amigo de Panamá, muchas gracias, a gente de todos lados, porque gracias a ellos hemos podido lograr sensibilizar a los que no son médicos, pero independientemente que no sean médicos, a los demás parlamentarios para que puedan entender la problemática de esta enfermedad. Que puedan sensibilizarse ante todo lo que tiene que pasar un paciente con tuberculosis, ante las dificultades psicológicas, emocionales, económicas, la falta de accesibilidad a los servicios, la falta del medicamento, la falta muchas de las veces de esa sensibilidad y voluntad que tenemos los políticos. La verdad que en la Comisión de Salud de mi país, que la verdad me da mucho orgullo presidirla, hemos estado trabajando desde que formamos el Frente. El Frente Parlamentario en México se formó aproximadamente hace un año. Y en este frente lo primero que hicimos fue decirle al gobierno federal que íbamos a ser unos aliados, decirle a la sociedad civil que no estaban solos, decirle a las asociaciones que contaban con nosotros para poder sacar las políticas públicas y más el recurso. Primero hicimos un punto de acuerdo muy contundente, firmado por los 500 diputados hacia el gobierno federal, donde nosotros pretendíamos que se pusiera más énfasis, más recurso humano, más recurso económico y que no hicieran a un lado el problema de tuberculosis. Pero además, nosotros fuimos a la cumbre del G20 en Berlín, donde tuve la gran oportunidad de conocernos a varios de ustedes, y hicimos una carta al presidente de la República donde le pedíamos que cuando estuviera en la reunión de jefes de Estado en el G20 subiera y se comprometiera a que le iba a dar seguimiento y a que iba a invertir más, no a gastar, porque normalmente decimos es que gastamos tanto en el tema, gastamos en salud. De verdad se los digo, el invertir en salud no es un gasto, el invertir en salud es mucho más que nada más dar un medicamento o ver una enfermedad. Yo, además de ver números en la Cámara de Diputados, veo vidas y no podemos estar perdiendo vidas por falta de dinero. No podemos estar perdiendo vidas, perdiendo gente cuando es una enfermedad que tiene cura. Cuando una enfermedad tiene cura, pues entonces, ¿qué tenemos que hacer? ¿Qué tenemos o cómo tenemos que sensibilizar a los gobiernos de nuestros países a que inviertan más en lo que se necesita para salvar estas vidas? La carta que le mandé al presidente no la voy a leer, solamente se las voy a resumir un poquito, pero sí yo le pedía, junto con mis 499 compañeros, que el reconocimiento de la tuberculosis, droga resistente, como un componente central de la amenaza mundial que representa la resistencia ante los antimicrobianos, pero además que teníamos que integrar esta enfermedad en las intervenciones de AMR o antimicrobianos. Teníamos que apoyar las estructuras para acelerar el desarrollo de regímenes de tratamiento que son urgente necesarios. Y lógicamente el apoyo por parte del gobierno mexicano a la resolución no de los diputados, a la resolución de la ONU para una reunión de alto nivel sobre la tuberculosis en el 2018. Recibimos contestación, tuvimos reunión con los encargados del programa, tuvimos reunión con el propio secretario de Salud, el cual tiene la sensibilidad, y decirles que yo estoy muy contento porque en estos días nosotros iniciamos el día lunes los parlamentarios sobre este tema, sobre tuberculosis, y hemos visto experiencias de la sociedad civil, las hemos escuchado, hemos platicado y hemos intercambiado lo que hemos hecho cada uno en nuestros países. Se han comprometido los que no tienen el frente parlamentario a formar ese frente parlamentario. Nos hemos comprometido a que el presupuesto de egresos, que estamos a días de votarlo en diferentes países, salga con más dinero el tema de la tuberculosis. Pero algo importante, nos hemos comprometido a trabajar con la sociedad civil, de la mano con la Unión, muy de la mano con el Fondo Mundial, y lo principal, yo estoy convencido que nada más hay una manera de poder sacar adelante y poder llegar al 2030 sin tuberculosis. Y esa única manera que es trabajar en equipo. Si trabajamos en equipo y cada uno hace lo que le toca desde su espacio, estoy convencido que lo vamos a lograr. El Fondo Mundial, y esto lo comento con un tema no de reclamo, pero sí hay una lámina que en el Fondo Mundial donde el 4% del fondo para tuberculosis, el 4% que da el Fondo Mundial a todos, solamente el 4% va para América. La invitación es, como buen político, gestionar para que ese porcentaje suba. El Fondo Mundial me decía que es un 4%, pero que implica miles de millones de dólares. Pero sin embargo es insuficiente porque seguimos teniendo problemas. Con el compromiso de que los gobiernos de cada país también tienen que aplicar y tienen que destinar dinero. No nada más podemos estar a la espera de estar pidiendo dinero al Fondo Mundial o de estar pidiendo dinero a la Unión. También los gobiernos tienen que poner su granito de arena para poder sacar el problema adelante. Yo concluyo, discúlpenme, me dieron 10 minutos, parezco diputado, hablo. Ya voy a concluir. Y concluyo diciéndoles que los parlamentarios seguiremos trabajando porque es nuestra obligación. Espero que los parlamentarios de los países que no han formado el frente rápido lo formen y que la sociedad civil, le vuelvo a reafirmar a la sociedad y a las asociaciones civiles, que no están solos, que hay diputados igual que ellos, que somos padres de familia, que somos hermanos, que somos tíos, que somos hijos, y que no queremos que no nada más nuestros familiares, que no queremos que nuestra población se enferme más de una enfermedad curable como es la tuberculosis. Así es que nuestro lema debe de seguir siendo juntos todos para el 2030 tener un mundo sin tuberculosis. Muy buena tarde para todos.
Muchísimas gracias, honorable diputado Elías. Es muy bueno saber que las Américas, una región que por mucho tiempo la tuberculosis no ha sido priorizada, ahora ya estamos cambiando esta situación y a través del Frente Parlamentario estamos trayendo voluntad política e intentando cambiar también el rumbo de la historia de la tuberculosis en la región. El diputado tuvo que ir porque tiene compromiso ahora, pero paso la palabra a Denis Falzón, que es un Medical Officer de la OMS, la Organización Mundial de Salud, que va a hablar sobre la posición de la OMS sobre tuberculosis y la agenda antimicrobiana. Muchas gracias.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thanks very much for the organizers for inviting WHO to present during this symposium. So my presentation is titled The Role of WHO in Addressing TB and Antimicrobial Resistance. I have no disclosures to make regarding conflict. I'm involved in the production of guidelines for TB treatment at the WHO headquarters in Geneva, and I need to acknowledge many people who have been involved in the work that I will be presenting, both in the collection of the data, in the preparation of the graphics, in the analysis which are behind these slides, and many of the other work that I will describe. The objective of my presentation is to present how TB has been, over the last couple of decades, acting as one of the flagships for antimicrobial resistance in the wider sense. And I will use examples on the different roles that WHO has in providing support and leadership in areas relating to monitoring of the epidemiological situation, the production of guidelines, assistance with strategic planning both at global and national level, and advocacy activities for mobilization of resources. So starting with the monitoring, this is, I think, a slide which you must have seen many times over the last year. The numbers which are shown here will be updated in a few weeks when WHO releases its 2017 Global TB report. In essence, we are talking of a disease which causes about 10 million new cases every year, of which about 600,000 would require second-line treatment because of MDR or rifampicin-resistant forms of disease. There are about 1.8 million deaths due to TB every year, making TB the first or the topmost single infectious cause of death globally. About 250,000 of those deaths occur in people with MDR TB, which is the subject really of this presentation. The monitoring and the surveillance activities that WHO has been promoting and being implemented by countries globally have led to a much improved understanding of the patterns of drug resistance in the world. What you see in green over here are those countries which have representative data for the prevalence of rifampicin or MDR multi-drug resistance in their countries. And those are the countries in green which have high-quality data dating back at least 7 years, many of them much more recent. But you see, more importantly, some gaps over there, particularly in Africa, where we don't even have single measurements of drug resistance in the country. So this is an important, these maps are helpful at advocating for better understanding of drug resistance globally. So it's been more than 20 years now that we have established this global network of drug resistance studies on anti-tuberculosis drugs. And in these 20 years, we have managed to, when I say we, it means the global TB community, of course, it's not just WHO. I have the privilege to present all this, but this represents the work of many committed people at country level and many technical and donor partners. So what this map shows is a global network of what we call supranational TB reference laboratories, which are centers of expertise and global leadership in the expertise in diagnostics, which have been instrumental in helping countries improve their laboratory and strengthen their laboratory capacity, both to do testing for patients, which helped in the decision-making on their treatment, but also to give us a picture about surveillance. And this slide summarizes the prevalence of MDR or rifampicin-resistant TB amongst TB patients. You see that we have fairly accurate estimates now, which are fairly robust, both at country and region and global levels, with which we can plan and understand better what is the size of the problem. Okay, you've seen the slides as well, probably in the past. This represents in shades of brown the increasing risk of drug-resistant TB in countries, particularly countries of the former Soviet Union. But you can also see that other countries have appreciable levels of risk among their TB patients. And these data also help us to come up with estimates of burden, of global burden. So you can see over here these stripes over here, which indicate either the incidence of TB, of MDR-TB globally, which is at about 600,000 cases, and also the estimate of what MDR cases can be found even amongst known TB cases. And these two traces over here, over time, represented cases who are detected in pink over here, and the cases who are placed on MDR-TB treatment. You see some convergence over here, but we are still very far away from the incidence and the estimates amongst the notified TB cases. So I think the take-home message over here is that despite much effort over time, we are still very far away from coming to the targets. And I think this is an important thing that we need to keep in mind. Okay, these series of slides of graphics represent treatment outcomes for successive years. So if you just look at the final set of graphs over here, which represent the global picture, these are the other regions in the world, but the graph in green represents another important indicator that we have, which is the success amongst patients with MDR placed on treatment. And what you can see is despite this long series from 2007 to 2013, and now we'll have data for patients starting treatment in 2014, despite this, you can see that the success rate has stagnated at around 50%, okay, with a substantial amount of patients who fail treatment and die, okay, and people who are lost to follow-up. Data completeness tends to be improving here, shown in gray, so with reductions. You see regional variations, but overall you see this, unfortunately, this stubborn sort of stagnation at around 50% of cure and completed. I'm sorry. Okay, so in essence, the monitoring since '94 has allowed us to understand better the global trends, drug-resistant TB, to track programmatic response, how countries are doing with recruiting patients on treatment, okay, and how much that effort is effective, assessing the impact of interventions, and from that leading us to have better informed policies and advocacy efforts, and the ability as well, the capacity to provide support to countries. Which leads us to the second aspect of the work of WHO, which is the production of normative guidance. So starting with prevention, over here you see the blue guidelines, which are about the treatment of drug-susceptible TB, which is the starting point for the prevention of development of resistant disease. And the other guide, which is being updated right now, is about the treatment of latent TB infection, and which also includes a section about the treatment of latent MDR-TB for people exposed to MDR-TB. We have been also quite active with our partners on the production of guidelines on diagnostics, which are important starting point for the detection of people living with people who have MDR-TB, and as a result of that, putting these patients on appropriate treatment. And this is the series of guidance that WHO has produced on treatment of MDR-TB. The production of guidelines is now following a more rigorous process of evidence review and a formulation of recommendations based on the best available evidence. Latest guidelines were produced in 2016. We'll have more guidance coming out even this year for the treatment of isoniazid-resistant TB. And in parallel with all that are also production of reports of the global situation. Okay, so the next report will come out in end of October. And also you see along the same timeline the production of guidelines on how to conduct surveillance, or how to do surveys in countries. Another aspect of our work is the strategic planning, both at global, regional, and national level. And I think one of the landmarks that I wanted to stress in my presentation is the resolution of 8 years ago at the World Health Assembly, which urge countries to work towards universal healthcare in terms of aiming to diagnose and treat all the MDR patients in their countries. Okay? And I think this has been an important driver for countries to translate the terms of the resolution into country-level plans and to sort of accelerate their efforts to diagnose and treat patients. Towards the end of the MDG period, WHO also, the World Health Assembly also issued a resolution for the post-2015 period, which is in this document over here about coming up with a global strategy targets for tuberculosis, which WHO then translated into the anti-TB strategy for the period, for the 20 years after 2015. And even this document here, which has elements on how to implement the anti-TB strategy, highlights as well indicators which are very relevant for drug-resistant TB. Now, aside from TB, there are a number of activities which have geared up in the last few years relating to the larger picture of antimicrobial resistance. And I think the World Health Assembly resolution of 2015, I think, highlights the drive by countries and by partners to have a global action plan and a strategy in place to address antimicrobial resistance, not just for tuberculosis or the major diseases, but also for, let's say, hospital-acquired infection. And this comes from the concerns about the loss of sensitivity to antibiotics of many common infectious organisms. And the last aspect that I wanted to mention is about how the information that we have is translated into advocacy and messaging. This is a slide from the Treatment Action Group report, which shows in red the situation with respect to different elements of research for TB, and you see in blue over there is what the targets were in the global plan of 2015. And you can see that the huge shortfall that is you can see in all different aspects of research for TB. I think this is also a very important slide which needs to be promoted because of the significance of this lack of investment in key research areas. Last month, WHO also released another document about the priority organisms for research and development, and I think this document is important. It brings into high profile the position of tuberculosis amongst the other bacteria which are important for continued research and development. Next month we will have a very important political event with the Interministerial Conference in Moscow, and this also is expected to be an important landmark to continue to motivate countries and partners to release more funds into the fight against TB and MDR-TB. Okay, and this is the Moscow conference will serve as well as a springboard for preparations for the UN General Assembly in 2018, in which there will be one session devoted to tuberculosis. Also, tuberculosis featured high on the G20 in July as well. There was a mention amongst the other organisms for which the group called for this new international collaboration to promote greater R&D. Okay, so in conclusion, AMR was recognized as one of the challenges to efforts to curb TB very early on compared with other major diseases. The action by many partners, I think, has been really exemplary, and we always, as WHO, showcase this as one way of engaging partners now for other aspects of antimicrobial resistance efforts to curb other antimicrobial resistance. You can see in very different sectors we have been able to score some successes, and the lessons learned from this will certainly serve for other strategies. So that was my last slide. So I think if you have any questions, I would be very happy to try to address them. Thanks.
Thank you, Dennis, for the overall on behalf of the WHO. And it's very good to see how the agenda, the TB and MDR-TB agenda is included in the world agenda, in the World Health Agenda, in the perspective of how it's included in the agenda of the Global Ministerial Conference and the high-level meeting on tuberculosis. And thank you very much for that. It's my pleasure to introduce you now to our next speaker, Mr. Serhil Kiril. He is an Ukrainian member of parliament and member of the Global TB Caucus. He is the rapporteur of a report recently initiated by the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe on the impact of AMR, in particular MDR-TB, in the European and Central Asian region. Mr. Kiril has also been leading on the establishment of a Ukrainian parliamentary interfaction platform on TB and on the group that was launched on the 3rd October in the Ukrainian parliament in partnership with local and regional civil society, in particular the Alliance for Public Health Ukraine, who is the civil society focal point for the Global TB Caucus in the country. You have the floor now. Thank you very much.
Hello? Yes? Oh, okay. You hear me? It would be good also to know how to switch presentations. Oh, okay. Thanks. Good day, everyone. My name is Serhil Kiril, as was already introduced. I'm a member of parliament from Ukraine, and I want to try to answer this question, in fact. How did I get here? The reason this question came up to my mind is that I'm not a doctor, so I'm not a healthcare specialist. TB is something new for me, as nobody in my family has ever had TB. But I am engaged and involved as a policymaker right now in this. And I was thinking maybe it will be interesting for many of you, particularly those who come from different countries and who wonder, how do we access politicians? How do we make sure that policymakers pay attention to TB? What are the triggers? Of course, I don't have the right answer, but a little bit of the background here on Ukraine. Ukraine is, as you know, many of you, in a very difficult situation right now. It's a big country in the heart of Europe, which is currently in war with Russia, and it's not the first time. Throughout its history, we were torn between different empires, Austro-Hungarian Empire and Russia Empire. And that, of course, has had an impact on the mentality and the culture of the Ukrainian society, which is, for the most part, not really proactive, very much ready to listen to who is the boss, who is on the top. And, well, the politicians, the policymakers have to take this into account. So how, in this kind of environment, you make sure that issues like TB, when you are fighting a war, when you have people fighting and dying in the east, and Ukraine, when you have 7% of your territory annexed, being paid attention to by the government, by the parliament, by the policymakers. And the TB is a big problem in Ukraine, as you all know very well. The politicians, of course, are different, but in Ukraine, we are lucky to have a new era politicians coming into play right now. These are the people which were elected to parliament after the last revolution in Maidan. And these people are different from the conventional generation. And this is very important also to understand. They have a lack of experience, but they are at the same time ambitious. They're open to innovation, very important. They're keen on working with the civil society. They use a lot of technology, like social media as well, in their work. So what triggers did affected me and made me get involved and can be also of use in many other cases. Of course, as I said, many of them are very ambitious. So any supranational initiatives can work because they want to be associated with that. There is strong civil society backing. This is extremely important to have an understanding that you will be supported. Of course, the opportunity to make a real change. These are not the people that will just sit and get paid and do nothing. They want to have a real change and to have to write about it in everywhere and talk about it. There is no conflict in interest, vested interest, because they have lack of experience and, of course, lack of understanding how these interests work and can be burnt out quite quickly. And the last point is, of course, the ENC activity, a study, a report, or a project in progress that they can kind of jump in and be involved in right away. So this is what actually made me step into this game, and what we have so far. And I've been there only for the last several months. I have been appointed as a rapporteur by the Council of Europe Parliamentary Assembly, and we have already had a fact-finding mission to organize to Azerbaijan, where I had a chance to learn how TB is being treated in the penitentiary service in particular. We have recently set up a caucus, we call it a parliamentary platform to fight TB in the Ukrainian parliament. And I want to say that attempts have been done before, but unsuccessfully. We have signed a declaration, and the Minister of Healthcare, civil society representatives, and MP have undersigned it to combine efforts for joint action. We have a plan to hold the parliamentary hearings next year, hopefully before the UN General Assembly meeting. We have also had the Minister of Healthcare already committing to the UN General Assembly deadline for the preparation of Ukrainian National Action Plan for that, which is, I think, extremely important because once you have a deadline with the government, it's very difficult. But once you have it, have their commitment, that means that you can control them and have additional pressure so that they deliver. And of course, I'm here now in Mexico. It's my first time here, and I enjoy this country. I'm very excited. So these are some of the media coverage, very important for politicians. We have also created a parliamentary platform, caucus, web page and Facebook page, where everyone can put in and provide their feedback. This is extremely important to ensure that there is accessibility between the civil society, people, patients, and we have a number of patients associations, to the high level of the politicians, so that they also have this confidence that they can communicate and can deliver. So what are the success factors, in my opinion? First of all, we have to understand that we are living in the information age. And as Alec Ross, which is a former Obama administration advisor on technology, said in his book, that data is like iron in the iron age, and data in the information age is the raw material. So you have to work with data, you have to work with technology, you have to work with social media in order to access policymakers and politicians and get them involved, interested. Go regional, but not only national. One of the things we are talking about, and I will definitely want to look into it in my report, is to get municipalities involved. Municipalities, their role in tackling whether it's climate change problem or TB problem is very often overlooked. 90% of people live in municipalities. So we have to be more active in working with association of municipalities. Every country has them between the policymakers and these associations, and also push the governments to decentralize whether it's funding or responsibilities, whether it's social services or psychological care, from the central level to the municipal level, where municipalities often have the infrastructure in place. The role of civil society, and Ukraine is a very clear, I think maybe even best example, particularly of the last revolution of dignity of 2013, is very important, because they are more trustworthy than any conventional institutions or governments. They are a source of expertise, and for the most part they are independent. Not all of them, of course. You have to be very clear of the sources of funding, and they are very good at horizontal communications and at advocacy. So some people think that money is important, but definitely not for me. For me, in getting involved as a policymaker and partnering with civil society and the government, trying to do some work in this direction, is the ambition to make a real change. And I see that in TB, and my colleague from Mexico has just confirmed that, there is a possibility to make a change. It's not always about research and development, medication, but there's so much work that needs to be done in terms of the policy making, the health, the approach to treating TB, the monitoring of the patients, providing social care, psychological care. This is not about money. This is about the changes from the conventional approach to a more modern-based approach. To learn a new field, so it's always good to have a challenge. It's also an opportunity to build a new network, but it's also for those who are in this, like the Global TB Network or the other organizations which are specialized on TB, to access my network, which many people, whether they are members of parliament or government representatives, have never heard anything about TB, nothing to do with TB, and it's good through me to be a communication channel between these networks and the network I'm involved in my daily activities. And of course it's excitement. So you see there's no money in that list. There's nothing about that. So to sum up, what you need to have, you don't need to be smart or rich to trigger the policymaker or get him involved in this process. Simply do it, but you know, you will have definitely high chances if you approach the policymakers, particularly in such countries like Ukraine, Central and Eastern European countries, the post-Soviet bloc, that represent the younger generation. They are more open, they are more ambitious, they like challenges, and they definitely are more responsible. Engage civil society, visit regional continental cooperation bodies. In fact, the way I got involved is through the Global TB Caucus, who approached my colleague, the head of the Ukrainian delegation within the Council of Europe, who then asked me to pick up the topic and submit a motion for resolution within the Council of Europe, because I'm a member of the Social Affairs and Healthcare Committee within the Council of Europe. And that's when it's all started, through this networking and communication, now giving a certain result. Of course, be ready to support if you're an expert or a civil society representative. Well, and remember, she is a politician, so media coverage, social media coverage of the events has never been excessive. So that's very briefly, I think I gave some, maybe thrown out some ideas, and ready to comment and discuss later on. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this inspiring presentation and for the excellent work you're doing in Ukraine and in the Eastern Europe region. Thank you very much. So now it's my pleasure to present Ms. Yulia Chorna, who is going to speak about engaging civil society in high-burden countries ahead of the Russian Ministerial Conference and the UN High-Level Meeting on TB. Julia is the TB Advocacy Manager at the Alliance for Public Health in Ukraine. The Alliance is one of the TB Regional Eastern Europe Central Asia project partners through the TB Europe Coalition, involved in the coordination of the component of the regional civil society advocacy in 11 countries of the Eastern Europe and Central Asia. Julia's area areas of professional expertise since early 2000s have been closely intertwined with the health and social-oriented civil society organizations in Ukraine. Yulia has a master's degree in social work with a focus on community organization, policy planning, and administration from Syracuse University. The floor is yours, Julia.
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure and an honor for me to represent civil society in this panel. My presentation will be about what and how we should do and why we could cooperate together with members of parliaments, together with other stakeholders for the goal of ending TB. So as a civil society, I would like to start with the importance of community mobilization. Because in all the processes going in the countries, in preparation to high-level meetings, it is very important to bring as many stakeholders as possible, both to raise the awareness about all these processes and to create joint common messages and joint actions. So for us as a civil society, there is a sense of urgency. We already heard a lot of statistics and tendencies in tuberculosis. I would like also to briefly outline some bit of it is, because for us it's really a call for actions and a sense of urgency. So antimicrobial resistance is a global health security threat, and it is already been on the high-level political agenda, including IMRH high-level meetings and G20s. And as I represent the European region of Eastern Europe and Central Asia, for my region, the issue of drug-resistant tuberculosis is a critical one, and when worldwide it constitutes 1/3 of all AMR-resistant cases. In Europe, according to UK review on AMR, it is essential to antimicrobial resistance. So why to engage with civil society and how to collaborate? Sergei has already mentioned in his presentation it is important to make these bridges. And when we speak about high-level meetings, both Moscow and New York one in 2018, when we speak about it, we sometimes think about it in silos. Civil society has somewhere, and high-level meetings is something else. And there is a gap between both actors, because for civil society sometimes it is also not very clear why it is important to engage, what should be messages, how the situation for them in the countries will change if we participate. So civil society, representing both non-governmental organizations and representing patient activist groups and citizens, basically they do a lot at the country levels, both in prevention and detection of new cases, providing peer-to-peer support services and fighting stigma around people who are affected by tuberculosis. They do advocacy, of course, and of course they are well suited for partnerships at the national levels. They are not acting in silos. Very critical is cooperation with national TB programs, with ministries of health, with members of parliaments, and civil society is also a resource for data collection. So that's why civil society should be involved in all the high-level meetings processes, from the starting of planning to participating and then to monitoring how actually the decisions which are made at such high-level meetings then implemented in the countries. What is the accountability? What is done after the commitments are taken by the heads of states? So for us now we have almost 1 year in preparation for UN high-level meeting, and it's very important to secure this bridging between high-level meeting processes and between civil society grassroots activism. And we can do it through community mobilization. I would like to highlight importance of regional and global networking for civil society because myself, I'm based in Ukraine. I work for an organization called Alliance for Public Health, but Alliance also belongs to the wider networks, including TB Europe Coalition, which is a network of activists and organizations active in the region, in our region. So through access to the networks, we could really engage more civil society representatives in order to have a consensus about the most important messages and in order to ensure that the voices of people directly affected by TB are heard when the important decisions about effective TB care and about actions needed at the country level are made. Another important issue which was already highlighted by Mr. Kirill is cooperation with the networks of parliamentarians. We cooperate closely with Global TB Caucus, and Alliance is a focal point at the country level, representing the civil society, working with Global Caucus and working with the members of parliaments. So basically, we were very much engaged in creation of the Ukrainian TB Caucus platform and providing support necessary for that. So what we would achieve is the civil society as a part of the processes of preparation of high-level meetings. First of all, for the civil society representing the people, it will be empowerment, being a part of the processes. It will be insurance of accountability after the meetings are over and decisions are started to be implemented in the countries. It will ensure sustainability also, because civil society stays active, they act at the country levels, and this is very important for the response. For that, what is done, the people are brought together to the forums like that and to other meetings, and representing the civil society, it is also very important to provide the grassroots support to their activism and activities on different projects, including the regional projects. And then it is very important to have the common messages, to be able to voice up these messages for the political declarations, which will be prepared by the countries in advance of the high-level meetings. I would like also to give you a brief example of a recently created panel, which is called Affected Communities and Civil Society Coordination TB High-Level Meetings Advisory Panel. It operates with the support of ICSS and Stop TB Partnership, and it now includes 15 members representing civil society all around the globe, including myself. So what is planned for the work of this panel? There will be a campaign throughout 2017-2018, which would ensure all these issues I mentioned before, like representing the voices of civil society in the outcomes of high-level meetings. And it will include in-person preparatory meetings, it will include calls, we will do the follow-up and reaching out throughout the region, throughout different members of different regional networks. And we will produce communication and advocacy materials. There are plans for accountability and lobbying weeks when the civil society would really meet with the representatives of UN missions to make their voices heard and to do the messages. And there will be processes post high-level meetings, which is, as I already said, are critical because it's really about accountability, about implementation, and about making all the promises happen. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Julia, for this inspiring presentation and for the work you've been doing in civil society and raising the voice of civil society and working in your region from your perspective to make a change. It's my pleasure to introduce you, a personal friend of mine, Enrique Delgado, who is going to talk about the human impact of drug resistance tuberculosis. Enrique is a member of, is a focal point for the America's TB Caucus from Panama. In 2009, Enrique contracted XDR-TB. In order to survive, Enrique had a lobectomy plus 7 years of treatment in 4 different countries. While undergoing treatment, Enrique became a member of several NGOs as an advocate and advisor on TB. He also joined civil society organizations across Latin America to promote and fight for a good health system, patients' rights, and medicine supply. Enrique has a bachelor's degree in economics and is a master's in finance from Venezuela, but he currently lives in Panama. He is a patient advocate for TB Project Latam Spain. You have the floor.
Well, good evening, everyone. Buenas tardes a todos, todas. Es para mí un honor estar aquí. It's a great pleasure for me to be here. And thank you for your time, for your commitment with the TB cause. The presentation, I'm going to present some slides and make some speech. So I prefer pay attention to the speech. So I'm going to pass the slides slowly, right? Well, my name is Enrique. I belong to the 20% of people who have survived extensively drug-resistant TB. I have lived for 7 years with the disease and traveled 4 countries finding the cure. By the year 2009, I used to work in Panama in a multinational electronics company. Because of the nature of my job, I used to travel a lot all over Latin America and the Caribbean. In September 2009, after a busy schedule of trips, I started to feel weak, night sweating, and all the other usual symptoms that you already know about the TB. But it was an intense pain in my back that makes me go to the doctor. A chest X-ray shows a cavity on my right lung with the size of a 25-cent coin, like this size, approximately. Immediately, I have to be hospitalized and start the treatment, in this case, a Category 1 regimen. I was declared cured in February 2010, but in April, I relapsed with the TB symptoms and confirmed by smears. At that time, the diagnosis capacity, availability of drugs, and experience of MDR TB management in Panama was scarce. As I didn't have access to drug susceptibility testing, I was empirically prescribed with some drugs plus new ones as moxifloxacin and clarithromycin. Neither moxifloxacin nor clarithromycin were provided by the Panama National Program of Tuberculosis, and I had to search by myself the best options to buy them. I started to live alone and work from home to reduce the risk to infect others until smears were negative. However, my fear, it was increasing about that, no matter negative results. In March 2011, I was declared treatment failure based on sputum smears and a chest X-ray. So I decided to make me a right upper lobectomy, knowing that will not be the solution, but reduce some bacillus in the lung. So the surgery took 7 hours. Upper lung was totally damaged. At the time, I knew I have to search other options for the treatment in another country. And I find out that Peru was a good choice. I contact some doctor of the national program in Peru, and their willing to help was really amazing. I traveled to Peru in May 2011. Of course, my culture were negative at that time. And the NTP, the national program, offered me MDR treatment that was available for me. I had to live in Peru almost 4 months, but it was responding good, this treatment. In this slide, there is a timeline of the whole process. I'm gonna stay with that slide so you can see it as I'm speaking. Well, unfortunately, culture's result shows that I was resistant to almost everything, declaring XDR-TB. Despite that, and for the difficulties to make an XDR treatment due to medicines availability and hospitalizations, also expertise management, I continued with the MDR treatment at that time. During 2012, all bacteriology results were negative, but I faced a great problems with the medication shipments, drug purchase, and expiration dates of the medicines in Panama. Finally, in May 2013, after daily injection for 8 months and nearly 22 months of almost daily nausea and vomiting, among others, psychological, emotional, and physical symptoms, I was declared cured by them. In October 2013, I was invited to the Union World Conference that was held in Paris to present my experience as an XDR survivor and the support that my company, my work, gave to me. Unfortunately, again, in March 2014, only 1 year after being declared cured, a mild cough emerged. A little, but it was there. I got a CT scan, which showed minimal bronchial inflammation. Smear and cultures were negative. I was aware that the bronchoalveolar lavage samples yield superior performance, so I did it privately. Test indicates Mycobacterium tuberculosis with rifampicin resistance, meaning a relapse after 5 years of physical, economic, and emotional desolation. I knew by then that I had XDR-TB because the results in Peru showed that, but the last treatment, it went well. I feel good, but something happened in them. So at that time, I contact a physician whom I met in the Union Conference, and an increasing sterilizer regimen was needed based on the potential remaining effective drugs, plus at the least one sterilizing drug, for example, linezolid or clofazimine. In addition to companion drugs, it would be imipenem, bedaquiline, or lamanid. Reduced availability, bureaucratic limitations place bedaquiline and lamanid out of reach. The availability of medication plus high drug and hospitalization costs made treatment virtually impossible in Panama or Venezuela or Peru. But there was a chance in Barcelona, in Spain. Provided my still post-bacillary state in 2014, I exhausted the last resource of my family and traveled to Spain in search of a cure. The bacillary samples were cultured, and DST showed that XDR-TB, resistant to moxifloxacin, micacin, and the other drugs. I was treated then with 24 months with capreosimine, levofloxacin, cycloserine, and other medicine with linezolid. I need to stop after 6 months the linezolid due to severe paresthesia, which I still remain. That's for me to continue with another imipenem and clavulanic, and having a central line for 2 years. It was right on my chest. Receiving treatment in a supportive institution that calls a race clinic to remain adherent and emotionally stable. However, loneliness, desolation, and guilt appear in any time. The drugs' side effects did not help. It is blaming patients for default, but when there is so much already lost and there is no clear future, the line for default is too narrow. Give up or even dying presents as an appealing solution. I want to maybe if you want, close your eyes or just read it. But many times I think on that imagine yourself living away from your family to protect them. Imagine yourself thinking every day in how your family is doing or dealing without your economical support. Imagine yourself taking more than 15 pills or 20 pills every day at the same to carry an intravenous system to receive another medicine. Imagine yourself that some of these medicines affect your emotions, feelings. You feel sad, angry, worried, or mad. Imagine yourself trying to avoid feelings or questioning why this is happening. Now imagine dealing with all these things during 2 years, in my case more. Imagine telling your child, because I love you, I have to leave you. So it is what really, it wasn't easy. My treatment ended in July 2016. I'm already cured. I miss a part of my lung that will limit my breathing forever. I present paresthesia, and I will be, that's kind of funny, I'll be purple person for a while because of chlorphasmin. I make like a tropical tan, but it's not so hard to get. At least I'm not completely deaf. I met people who have 100% of hearing, but the most important side effects are not visible. I had more than 200 days, cumulative days, under respiratory isolation. It was a horrible experience. I had suicide thoughts, almost break my willing to go on. I lost a precious time with my daughter. I lost my career, and my family struggled for a while financially, and I have to start over again to stabilize my life in many aspects. This is the team who collaborates with my health in Barcelona. This is a race clinic team. It's a very, very nice example of how do you treat the tuberculosis, not only with the medicines you need, but the human quality and how you have to treat any persons without very hard circumstances. I met persons from all over Africa, from Pakistan, from Romania, from Ukraine, from Russia, from Ghana, from Guinea Equatorial, and they were loving and kindly with all these persons. My years fighting TB show not only how patients get tangled in the resistance spiral, but the many obstacles they must have to face because the health systems are underfunded, ill-prepared, and not patient-oriented. Cure rates of only 20 to 50% are unjust, inefficient, and likely promote the spread of resistance. Given the consequences of the DR-TB crisis, we need to work differently and invest much more in different levels. I would like to share these words and dedicate to all TB patients who fight the battle in their life with sacrifice and resilience. I have to learn a lot of that. To whom don't have a voice or any resource to ask for help, but with their hearts, humility, and willpower, can win this battle. Gracias, bueno, y que viva México. Quiero hacer una reflexión final. Soy fanático del fútbol. I like very much soccer. And como el diputado Elías dijo, as a deputy parliamentary Elías said, we are a team. We are a team. And as Mexico classified for Russia 2018, we are in the team to 2013 to stop TB. So we have to play as a team. In the forward would be the patient, with the NTP and the pharmaceutical. In the middle, the government, parliamentarians, research and development. On the defense, the OMS, Stop TB, private sector, NGOs, and some associations. And as a goalkeeper, the civil society. I think with that team engaged, we can make it. Gracias.
Muchas gracias, Kike. Thank you. It's always very touching when I hear you speaking. So thanks for sharing your experience and how you managed to win that battle. But I would like to introduce you now to the Member of Parliament, Nick Herbert. He's a Member of Parliament from the UK and one of the first MPs to take the lead on TB. He's the co-chair of All-Party Parliamentary Group on TB in the UK and co-chair of the Global TB Caucus, a network that started as a small organization as one of his first initiatives, and it's now grown into a network of more than 2,500 members of parliament from more than 130 countries. So Nick, you have the floor.
Well, thank you, Cynthia, very much indeed. In my parliament, this is known as a wind-up speech, which is the speech that you give to conclude a debate. And I'm very pleased and honoured to have followed Enrique, because I think it's very powerful to be reminded of the human impact of what we are discussing. So often in the debate around tuberculosis and around antimicrobial resistance, we trade figures, and those figures are so spectacularly large that we often neglect, I think, the human impact. So we know that the study that was set up by the British government into antimicrobial resistance suggested that the cost of AMR by 2050, if measures are not taken to deal with this risk, could run into trillions of US dollars to the global economy and lead to 75 million deaths. Those are such eye-wateringly large figures that it's very easy, I think, to forget that what that means is a huge amount of human suffering, unnecessary human suffering and deaths. And there is both a moral imperative and an economic imperative, a security imperative, to ensure that this does not happen. So hearing the human story, I think, is very important. And it's also, I think, important that we continue to remind those that are engaged in the AMR debate, which is a very important one, of the role that tuberculosis already plays in this area and will play if antimicrobial resistance takes off even further. So we know that a third of all AMR deaths at the moment are because of tuberculosis, and tuberculosis is an infectious disease, airborne as we all know, and therefore other people can become infected as a consequence of it. And TB would have therefore a huge component of the projected deaths and economic cost of AMR going forward. So it's very important that we link these discussions, link the discussion about what we need to do with tuberculosis with AMR, and it was not always so. The recent story of getting antimicrobial resistance onto the political agenda was very much an example of the importance of the combination of political leadership and medical and scientific leadership. And it is that combination that's necessary to drive action in relation to these issues. It was the initiative, for instance, of Dame Sally Davis, the Chief Medical Officer in the UK, who persuaded our then Prime Minister, David Cameron, that this was an important issue, that persuaded the Prime Minister then to launch a review on the issue that was chaired by Jim O'Neill, Lord O'Neill, a former investment banker, then subsequently made a Treasury Minister. And it was David Cameron who persuaded his fellow political leaders of the importance of putting AMR on their political agendas. And that was a hard thing to do, because you are inviting global leaders to think about what is going to happen in the future with a danger that is not immediate, as opposed to all the very pressing issues that they face currently, whether it is the global economic crisis as a consequence of the financial meltdown 10 years ago, or the impact of migration, or the costs to our health systems of aging populations. All of these things are issues that our leaders are grappling with, but we need the world's leaders to pay attention to the risks and the economic impact of what might happen if they lose control of this issue and antimicrobial resistance takes off in the future. And the second point to make here is that there is a kind of market failure as well, and that's the same market failure that has befallen tuberculosis. You know, there is a reason why we don't have the drugs, the diagnostics, and all of the things that we need to fight TB more effectively. They're coming, but they're coming too slowly. And that reason is that there's market failure, because TB is a disease that affects the poorest countries, not the wealthiest. And unlike HIV/AIDS, the pharmaceutical companies did not have the same market incentives to invest in all of these new things. And so unless we correct for that market failure and Western wealthier governments find ways to partner with those that will make these investments, we will not get the research and development that we need. And that is also true. There is also a market failure in relation to AMR, because we are talking about a future risk rather than one that governments are having to deal with now, other than the fact that the drug resistance is already beginning to manifest itself, as we know, in relation to TB. And we've heard the figures. A very significant proportion of the current deaths are TB, and in poorer countries, drug-resistant TB can become a death sentence. So we have to address these issues of market failure. That requires political leadership, and we have to work hard to get these issues onto the political agenda. And the Global TB Caucus, which I have the honor of co-chairing, has been very strongly engaged in this debate. We have been seeking to mobilize political opinion and encourage our parliamentarians in all of the countries around the world where we operate, 134 countries, to contact their leaders, their health ministers, their finance ministers, their heads of state, their heads of government, to explain why it is so important that they engage with the issue of TB as part of the issue of AMR, which they were already putting on their agenda. And so in Berlin, earlier this year, we held a very important meeting of our Global TB Caucus. We briefed them on the issues, and our members of parliament then dispersed to their individual countries and lobbied their heads of government. There were at least 5 direct meetings between our parliamentarians and heads of government. And the consequence of that was that, working with partners, we were able to secure TB written onto the G20 health agenda as part of the AMR communique and also the heads of state communique. And that didn't happen by accident. It didn't happen because it was already in the draft. It wasn't. It happened because we very specifically lobbied on the TB issue to get it up there and up the agenda. So I'll just say this in conclusion. We now have this unprecedented opportunity to drive TB further up the political agenda over the course of the next year. And that comes first with the WHO ministerial meeting in November. Then it comes through the Argentinian presidency of the G20. And then it comes with the high-level meeting at the UN, which is a very exciting opportunity to elevate these issues. And the Global TB Caucus has been working very hard with partners to get attention and support for that high-level meeting. Last week, I and my Australian colleague Warren Ench met 26 heads of mission in New York in order to promote the issue of TB and the President of the General Assembly, and we will continue to do so. And in that respect, we need to engage with civil society very strongly in order to be making a noise in each of the member states to ensure that TB rises up the agenda so that heads of government go to that high-level meeting knowing that this is an important issue. For too long, the case has not been made in a way that heads of government have heard or understood. We have this opportunity now, not just because of the AMR agenda, but because TB is the world's deadliest infectious disease now because of that human and economic cost. And that is an opportunity that we simply must seize. And that's why I'm very grateful for the powerful testimony of people like Enrique who tell us why this issue is so important, for the engagement of my parliamentary colleagues from the Ukraine and Mexico that we've heard, and my other parliamentary colleagues around the world who are determined that we beat this disease, not in 200 years, which is the current trajectory, but actually, according to the Sustainable Development Goal, in 15 years, which is, after all, what the world's leaders pledged just 2 years ago. Thank you very much.
Oh, there you go. We are running really late, and I think we have 1 minute before we have to finish the session. So can we take maybe one question and wrap it up, maybe? If you have any questions, just please come to the mic. Unless there aren't any. Well, then we're finishing this on time. Thank you very much for all the speakers. I'd just like to highlight that there's been a great effort from the Global TB Caucus, from civil society, from the international organizations such as WHO, to make sure that tuberculosis is in the global health agenda. And this is, we've just heard a feel of the interventions that we're making to make sure that TB remains as a priority. So thank you very much, everybody.